This podcast is brought to you by Osprey Approach. In conveyancing, fixed fees mean every minute counts. Too much admin eats into your profits, and inefficiencies slow transactions down. Osprey Approach is a legal software built for law firms, helping conveyancers stay in control by managing cases, accounts, documents, and compliance all in one place. From automated client updates to post-completion workflows, Osprey streamlines every step, cutting admin time and keeping transactions moving. Osprey Approach. We make running a law firm easier.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we are talking about what the government's announcement of modernising the home move might actually mean and what it might look like as well. I think there's a sort of a general understanding that conveyancers really struggle with what's happening in and around the market, in part because of a lack of information and in part because, as we all know, conveyancing is a really challenging role. It's very nose to the grindstone. People come in, they do their job, they go home, and it's quite challenging to see what's happening around the periphery. I have Nick Chadbourne, CEO of LMS, and Angela Hesketh, Head of Market Development at PEXA, with me. But those roles are kind of irrelevant to the discussion. You're actually here representing the Open Property Data Association, the OPDA. Great to have you both on the podcast. Can you both provide me a very brief introduction to yourselves, please? Nick first.
Thanks for having us on. Yeah, so Nick Chadbourne, I've worked in this side of the industry for nearly 10 years now. Still feel like a newbie, but yeah, working for 10 years. Prior to that, I was at a mortgage broker, so ran a mortgage intermediary for around 6-7 years. And before that, I worked at mortgage lender. So finance side and then through to conveyancing towards the latter part of my career.
And Angela, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on today. From my perspective, come from a slightly different angle from Nick. So I was in private practice as a conveyancer for over 30 years, and then more towards the latter part of that, did a lot of external work around what could we do to improve the life of the conveyancer and the process that we found ourselves in. And since then, I've been director of conveyancing transformation at Smooth, and then more lastly with PEXA as their head of market development, really spending a lot of my time externally in relation to all the different parts of the transaction and how can we bring it together in the best way.
Fab, thank you both so much for the introduction. So a couple of months ago, government, to much fanfare, announced that they were going to modernise and digitize the home move. And there was some sort of positive noises made by the industry, and as ever, some skepticism as well. Nick, can you kind of talk us through what the key components of that modernization announcement were? Because there was actually some stuff around Con29 and digitizing some of the council stuff, as well as looking more broadly around the property market.
It was fairly confused, I think it was fair to say. I think it was a very broad brush announcement around digitization of the home buying process, and that was back on the 12th of February. You know, this is nothing new. We've been talking about this for a while. The OPDA that Angela and I are kind of represented today have been working on this for a while. But it's nice that government have got involved, at least with some headlines. But it's specifically what are they looking to do? So they gave a few pain points that they're trying to solve. The amount of time it takes to process, the dropout rates, and the inefficiency of data, specifically data that's available from central government or from local authorities as well. So that on the 12th of February, the government made a number of these kind of high-level announcements. Underneath that, effectively, they're running two projects. The first project is a 12-week project that started back then, which really is about a data standards review. So does the industry need a set of data standards to work towards, and will that make a difference for the industry? What is government's role within that? and how would government need to play a part in both the implementation and the management of that? And are there any existing structures and frameworks within the industry that they could get behind and coalesce around? And things like the OPDA are under review, and Land Registry are part of this as well. So there's a number of actors that are really reviewing data standards within the home buying and selling process, and we expect that the outputs of that will be over the next few weeks. We'll kind of see what that first piece looks like. The second is a project that's being run by Land Registry, which is effectively, you mentioned their Con29 data, pilots around how can we digitize some of the data points that currently aren't digitized, that are managed by central government, Land Registry and local authorities, and running pilots to say how will they make a difference. So the two things come alongside each other, but they are being run as two separate projects, and we expect all of these or further information to come out in the next couple of weeks. Over and above that, you'll be aware of things like the smart data bill, the data use and access bill, ID and reusable ID. That sits under the DSIT. So the first one sits under the housing, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. The second one works under DSIT, the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. All of the things will come together. ID being kind of a central part, which I think Angela can give a lot more information about what's going on there, but reusable ID, that isn't just for the home buying and selling process, that is for all sorts of different industries, and therefore central government are looking at that separately, but there is a real use case that sits within the home buying and selling process.
ID will come on to shortly, and the government, I think, have been very clever around that because they've positioned it as being able to use it in pubs rather than in property, to try and get around the fact that traditionally, of course, the UK has been very anti ID cards and verification. But let's come back to that. Angela, can you give us some insight into the origins of the OPDA and why shared data needs an association that is going to drive that agenda forward?
In relation to the OPDA itself, that came out of originally the Home Buying and Selling Group, now the Home Buying and Selling Council, which was a group of businesses and individuals across the property market looking at different aspects that really needed a level of attention, whether that was digital property packs, material information, which I know we can talk about later on, or whether that was around data trust and how can we start to move our data more effectively and more efficiently. That was the technical group of the Home Buying and Selling Group. They came to a point where they'd created a data trust framework, so a framework that we could work within to share data across the different parties within the property ecosystem, really, to make sure that we can get to a point where information isn't forever having to be rekeyed in different ways. We can have a level of trust around it. We can have a level of sharing around it that is contained within trust framework. It came to a point where that had been created within the Home Buying and Selling technical group, but it was felt that it would be much more effective to bring it out and create the Open Property Data Association, and that happened around 18 months ago now, maybe 2 years thereabouts. And again, that was about how could we project that forward and show the benefits of a trust framework that would surround the property industry and give us that skeleton and that information that would enable us to share information more effectively and more efficiently and move away from the repetition and duplication that we have today.
Can you give us some practical examples about what data sharing means? And you talked about this property data trust framework, PDTF. People will have heard that acronym, won't they? What is that, and what practically, or how practically does that impact the work that's being done here?
Yeah, so it's all about creating a language, a common language. So at the moment, if we look at the very basic information, names, addresses, dates of birth, whatever it is in relation to that individual client or in relation to the property, the way the address is shown in different documents, everybody uses a different format and a different way of doing that. So when you have to move it from one place to another, so from the original estate agent and information there through into a case management system or through into further on from there, keying in for your land registry application or anything like that. Every system uses a different language and a different way of doing that. And we also have no way of knowing how we can verify that. So where did it come from? Who provided it? What level of trust can we place upon that bit of information? What's its identity? At the moment, it's just pieces of information that you're forever having to recheck, rekey, make sure where it's come from. I think it's safe to say as well, the trust in that information has vastly reduced over time as well. So from a conveyancer point of view, they're forever having to recheck that, rekey it, make sure that all of the systems that they're using talk to each other, none of which happens a lot of the time. So you have this constant need to duplicate, reproduce, but this will provide that real skeleton and basis and core of information where you'll not only be receiving it and passing it on in the same format, but it will have an identity around it that says this is where it came from, this is who gave it to you, and therefore you can make a decision as to what level of trust you can place upon it.
Angela's exactly right. It's really a tangible example would be, the information that you get on title directly from land registry. You can put an element of trust in that you can say, well, actually, I know where it's come from. I can see it's come from land registry. Right? Okay, I will believe the information that's come in from me because that's got a vouch against it that says that's from land registry. If something's been sent to you by a surveyor or a lender, you might have a slightly different view of it. You might have a level of trust in it, but you might have to recheck, or you might want to double check that, or you might want to read a PDF that's alongside it as an example, as well as take the data. So it might come with a different level of confidence or vouch against it, and then you'll have a third version or other options around when something's been keyed in, or it's been rekeyed from somebody else, or it's come through on a file, or whatever it might be, and then that might be something that you double check, or it might be going something you get evidence of. So effectively, as you get data through the process, it comes with a vouch, and that vouch tells you where it's originally come from, the originating point of it. So you can apply your own decisioning on what you want to do with that data. It's not us enforcing it on people.
That's understood from the point of view of data that might be attached to, for example, material and upfront information. That's not a debate that we're going to have here, but it's a direction of travel that the modernisation agenda seems to be taking. But when it comes to ID, that is where we're going to be able to have something that's immutable, something that we can share through the course of the transaction. There is this drive towards one verification of ID through the course of the transaction that can be relied upon right from IFA and lender through to the conveyancer.
In relation to the digital identity side, it is on a slightly different path. And I think it also has a much wider level of interest around it, because obviously government are looking at other cases that you can use it in, particularly in the pub and when you're going for a drink and all the rest of it. And that's obviously a lot more attractive than what we're doing in the home buying and selling process. But there you go, that's another conversation. But it's about, at the moment, the question is, do we need a specific digital identity for home buying and selling and the wider property market that is wrapped around our industry? There's a debate going on at the moment, which the Digital Property Marketing Steering Group are an integral part of, and they have the Digital Identity Working Group within that is talking to DCIT about, we have a digital identity attributes trust framework. There's lots of these acronyms, apologies, but we have this framework that sets out a set of standards in relation to digital identity. That's in place, that happens today, but it's not necessarily specific to what we want or require in the property industry. And also it's because of the differing needs for levels of trust and verification, we need to get to a point of, can we all agree within the property market the level of identity that would be acceptable, and create a supplementary code to the existing digital identity legislation and requirements that dictates what that is. And then at that point, we are in a place where we can, firstly, as conveyancers, identify the digital identity companies that supply that, and we can get to a point where that can be reused and reshared very easily by the individual consumer. So whereas today they might go into the estate agents and be required to provide one bit of identity, they'll come to the conveyancer and be required to provide another level. They'll go to a lender with another level, a broker with another level, and the land registry ultimately will require something else. What we're looking to do is bring that together so that there is one verified level that will be within the consumer's control, but ultimately they will be able to reuse it through the journey without having to work out what their next random selection of requests and inquiries are in relation to ID, and also make it a lot more secure. So it's not, identification isn't flying around in that process as well. So just removing that friction from there.
What I understand about the way in which this is going to work is it's almost going to be a bit like your credit report, where you have a digital ID that's perhaps centrally stored, and at various points in time, third-party services will hit it in the same way that your credit report is perhaps, soft checked, or whatever the phrasing might be. And that's how we're going to create this digital identity framework. Is that your understanding, Angela?
Yeah, effectively, yes. I mean, the actual application of it, we're moving into digital wallets and digital apps, and we've got a number of entities out there now that are providing reusable identity options across the board. So how it actually looks for the consumer, that's what I expect it to look like. It's going to be something that becomes very straightforward, that you're able to easily just press and deal with in the same way as you would with your face ID and things like that today. That's where we're going to move to. But what will happen in the interim is the question at the moment, because we've got to get to that point where everyone is comfortable with what that looks like and how that is delivered.
It'll be such a great thing for all financial services. I think the home buying and selling process is one, but actually, if you think about if you apply for a loan or for a credit card or a current account or a mortgage, whatever it might be, having that one ID that you own as a consumer, to be able to then push that to the relevant parties, whoever it might be, is so much better and slicker than actually going and calling it, them having each of those individual entities going and doing an ID check on you all the time. So as you described in terms of that credit report, just it constantly being there for somebody to then just poll and make a decision on, I think it's just such a much better customer journey.
And it's what we do in so many other areas, isn't it? Now, it's something that from a consumer point of view they're used to, and to suddenly be thrown back into, you've got to go and produce various bits of information and documentation, just feels really uncomfortable and makes them feel really exposed, I think, at times as well, in relation to where that ID is going and what's happening with it.
What's your understanding of where this leaves the safe harbour scheme that Land Registry launched, and effectively says that if you use ID providers that meet this standard, that there's a safe harbour from prosecution?
Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.
Land Registry are part of, very much an integral part of this debate and these discussions in relation to what this is going to look like. And Safe Harbour was brought about around lockdown to try and provide this additional way of dealing with identification verification. It remains to be seen whether that will be the future of identification around Land Registry and the way we go. And I think that Land Registry are very much a part of this debate. Obviously, what they have built to this point will be very much taken into consideration to see, is that the right level? Is that the way we should be going? Or is there an alternative that we move to or shift to? But Land Registry will be an integral part of that conversation, because ultimately the registration of the title is the ultimate aim, isn't it? When you're buying, selling, whatever, you've got to make sure that is the result at the end. So they will have to be an integral part of it, and whatever is agreed in that group or with DSIT or with OPDA, then it will follow through in relation to their processes and procedures.
This modernisation agenda comes at a time when, look, it's been very widely reported and shared that the government want to build this 1.5 million homes. Whatever people might think about the realism of that, there is a real focus on the property market. There are finite timescales on the 1.5 million homes. They want to do that in this Parliament. Is there any indication of what the timescales are around this modernisation journey? Because it's all very well and good building the damn things, but we have to transact them as well.
I think the short answer is no. There isn't any time frames against when this is going to come out. However, what I will say is the change of government has put a different emphasis on this, and there is a different agenda, and it feels like there's more impetus around it. There is an aspiration from this government to be globally leading on smart data and the use of smart data. So there is a real drive behind them to really kind of show how that can be done. And our sector is one that is high on their priority list. But bear in mind, the Digital Use and Access Bill goes back to 2021. So, we are a number of years into that kind of picks off some of the ID aspects that we talked about before. I don't expect this to come quickly. I also fully expect central government to really drive behind the private industry to move it forwards. I genuinely don't think today, is my opinion, I don't think today they are going to set out, outside of ID, really definitive expectations on what the industry needs to do. They'll talk about standards, they'll get behind certain schemes. I'm hoping that they get behind the OPDA and they really kind of support our work that we're doing here to drive it forward. But it will be, I fully expect it to be down to private industry to drive it forwards and show the commercial benefits, rather than it being central government setting standards, setting rules, and saying, they're not going to go back to the old HIPS days, and we're not going to do what we're got in Scotland. I don't expect those things to happen. I expect it to be private industry that has to drive it forwards.
I mean, the things that we do know, things that we can sort of hold a hat on, is the 12-week project is happening and is funded, and that's happening. The 10-month project is funded, so although it hasn't started, that is likely to happen. The Data Use and Access Bill is expected to go through in June. That is the expectation, although it was shelved when we had the general election last year, and this is just trying to get the energy behind it once again. And the Smart Data Council that has been created by the Department of Business and Trade are also very proactive in trying to push this forward as well. So those are the things you can say, but I don't think any of us, and digital identity, in relation to digital identity, there is a lot of activity in that area. I'm very, very much involved in that in relation to the work of the DPMSG, and that is creating a lot of activity within DCIT at the moment. So those are happening, but I think my concern is always ensuring that the connectivity between building the homes and being able to transact the homes is kept at the forefront, because if we build them with the current pressures on the conveyancing industry and everything within there, we will really struggle to be able to transact those. So we need that support and that investment to be able to move forward. The pressure on the industry at the moment, and the number of conveyancers who are looking to leave or have left, still has a big hole in it there that we need to resolve, don't we?
What has been clear in the last 12 months, there are commercial tangible benefits for different actors in the industry, for commercial organizations, for the end borrower, the end consumer, around doing things slightly different, the use of data in a different way, and data standards. There are tangible benefits that we can see that are in the market today, and they are now being proven out. So I think what we'll see a move towards it, with or without the kind of government's kind of push behind it, because there are such positives around doing things in a certain way.
It does feel as though it's a bit of that aim for the stars and you might hit the moon from the government as far as building is concerned. At the risk of ending on a very ethereal question, what do we think the impact of everything that we've talked about today is going to be on conveyancing and the role of conveyancers going forward, Angela?
Let me talk to you about what gets me really excited in this. For me, it's about how we can provide a much more effective and efficient data set to conveyancers that enables them to actually do what they thrive on, which is bringing information together in the most effective and efficient way and being able to advise their client confidently on that. Whereas today, they have to spend a lot of time verifying it, trying to make sure what level of trust they can place on it, and then being able to provide a level of advice to the client with lots of caveats around, if this is the case, then that's the answer, all of those things, because we have to do that, because that's what conveyancers are there to do in relation to what have I got, how much can I trust it, and what does that deliver for you in relation to the property that you want to buy, to get to a point where I can say, I know what I've got and where it's come from. So this information I'm going to dismiss because it's at a level where it may or may not be relevant. I may refer to it, but you can't rely on it. But this is information that I can absolutely get behind and be able to give you very confident advice on that. And that leads to a point where the conveyancer feels a lot more confident in the advice that they're giving. They haven't had to spend as much time obtaining it because it's coming to them with that reference and verification around it, and they're able to provide their clients with much better, sounder, cleaner advice that they feel is the best option for them. That's where I want to get to, and I see that being a journey, and it won't happen overnight. But with the number of people who are getting behind things like the data trust framework and things like that, it's also not that far away. It's there. It's within reaching distance that you're going to be able to get information in, understand it, be able to place a level of trust on it that you can place because you know where it's come from, and be able to provide a much more effective advice that doesn't involve you forever having to caveat that because you can't be absolutely sure or certain. That's what I would say.
So much currently is pushed onto conveyancers that doesn't need to be. Data standards, data use in the right way, we're being ethereal. If you think about the information that you get up front, goes into an estate agent, goes into a broker, goes into an underwriter at a lender. By the time it ends up with a conveyancer in the future, the conveyancer should only really be checking what the lender really needs them to check, not a generic set of instructions. It is something very specific where the lender can say, we've looked at all this stuff and we're perfectly happy with it. You just need to check these items down here. So the fallout rate, post-valuation queries to surveyors, these kind of things can all go away because it's been checked earlier on in the process, and the conveyancer can just do their job, go, right, this is the nitty-gritty that I need to advise my client on. I'll worry about that. That's my hope in the future, that all of this currently gets pushed onto conveyancers at the end of the process and puts a load of pressure on them, should be dealt with much earlier in the customer journey.
And to that point, and that should create bandwidth within the profession as well, because at the moment, whatever your average number of cases are, 50, 80, 100, whatever it is, we should be able to increase that bandwidth because, as you say, Nick, there should be much less work for them to do per matter. And here's the utopia, isn't it? We are going to deliver that 1.5 million homes over the course of the next 5 years, and we're going to transact them with the number of conveyancers that we've got. Let's see what happens. But it's been great to have you both on the podcast, and I really, really appreciate you as stakeholders in the process as part of the OPDA, what your understanding of the modernisation agenda looks like, and hopefully give some insight to listeners to what they can expect further down the track.
Thanks for having us, David. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much. It's been great.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Nick and to Angela. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.